Talk Ava. Learn English with confidence.
Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we're talking about two English words that seem very simple, but they confuse thousands of English learners every year. Those words are hear and listen. Have you ever stopped for a second and wondered which one you should use? If you have, you're definitely not alone.
I remember learning these words years ago, and at first they felt almost identical. Both are connected to sound, so it's easy to think they mean the same thing. But native speakers use them differently. And once you understand the difference, you'll start hearing it in movies, podcasts, and everyday conversations.
That's our goal today. We aren't going to memorize grammar rules or complicated definitions. Instead, we'll look at real conversations that show how native speakers naturally use these words.
And the nice thing is that these words appear everywhere. Whether you're at home, at work, in school, or walking through a busy street, you'll probably use one of them every single day.
Let's begin with something simple. Imagine you're sitting in your living room reading a book. Suddenly, there's a loud noise outside.
I might look up and say, "Did you hear that?"
That's a sentence native speakers use all the time.
Notice I didn't say, "Did you listen that?"
That's because hear happens naturally. You weren't trying to notice the sound. It simply reached your ears.
Maybe it was a car horn.
Maybe someone dropped something.
Or maybe your neighbor started mowing the lawn.
Whatever the sound was, you heard it without making any effort.
Now let's change the situation.
You're sitting in a cafe with a friend. The cafe is busy and lots of people are talking.
Your friend begins telling an interesting story.
Instead of looking at your phone, you focus on every word.
In that case, you're listening.
That's the key idea.
Listen means you choose to pay attention.
There's effort involved. You're not simply noticing a sound, you're focusing on it.
Let's compare them side by side.
I hear music coming from the apartment next door.
I listen to music while I'm cleaning my house.
Same topic.
Different action.
One happens naturally.
The other is intentional.
That's probably the easiest way to remember these two words.
Here's another everyday example.
You're walking through a park.
Birds are singing in the trees.
You hear the birds because the sounds reach your ears.
But if you stop walking and spend a few minutes enjoying their songs, you're listening to the birds.
The sounds didn't change.
Your attention changed.
That's a very important difference.
I think that's why learners sometimes mix these words up. They focus on the sound itself instead of thinking about whether someone is paying attention.
Once you think about attention, choosing the correct word becomes much easier.
Let's imagine another situation.
You're studying at home.
Your little brother is watching television in the next room.
Even if you're concentrating on your homework, you can still hear the TV.
But you're not listening to the TV because your attention is somewhere else.
That's a great example because both things can happen at the same time. You hear many sounds during the day without choosing to.
But you only listen when you decide to focus.
Here's something funny.
Go ahead.
Have you ever been reading a book while music was playing?
Many times.
Then someone asks, "What song is this?"
And I realize I have no idea.
Why? Because I heard the music, but I wasn't listening to it.
That's a situation many people can relate to.
Or imagine someone calls your name while you're deeply focused on your work.
They might say, "Didn't you hear me?"
But maybe I heard a voice without realizing they were talking to me.
That's another interesting point.
Hearing doesn't always mean understanding. Sometimes your ears receive the sound, but your brain is focused on something completely different.
That's why people sometimes ask another person to repeat what they said.
Before we continue, we'd like to ask everyone listening today something. Question for you. Which one is more difficult for you? Hear or listen? Write one example sentence using either word in the comments. We'd love to read your answers.
Reading your examples is always interesting because everyone learns English differently in every way. Your sentence might also help another learner understand today's topic a little bit better.
And if you're enjoying these everyday English conversations, don't forget to like this episode, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who's learning English with you. One thing I find interesting is that native speakers sometimes use both words when talking about the same situation, but they describe different parts of it.
That's true. Imagine you're walking through a shopping mall. You hear someone playing the piano in the distance.
At first, you simply hear the music because it reaches your ears while you're walking.
Then you stop for a moment because it sounds beautiful.
Now you're listening to the music.
The sound didn't change, your attention did.
That's why these two words work so well together in English. One describes noticing a sound, and the other describes paying attention to it.
Let's think about another everyday situation.
You're at home cooking dinner.
The oven timer makes a loud sound.
You hear the timer immediately.
Then you walk into the kitchen and listen to make sure it has stopped.
That's something many people do without even thinking about it.
Here's another example that happens at work.
You're in a meeting with several coworkers.
Someone is explaining a new project.
Your phone starts vibrating in your pocket.
You hear the vibration.
But you decide not to check your phone because you're listening to the speaker.
That's a nice comparison because two different sounds are happening at the same time.
One gets your attention for a second.
The other keeps your full attention.
Have you ever had someone say, "Are you listening to me?"
I think everyone has heard that question at some point.
Parents say it to children.
Teachers say it in classrooms.
Managers sometimes say it during meetings.
Friends even say it during conversations.
Nobody says that because they're wondering if your ears are working.
They're asking if you're paying attention.
That's an important difference.
If someone asks, "Can you hear me?" they're usually checking whether the sound is reaching you.
That's why people often ask this during phone calls or video meetings.
Imagine your internet connection becomes weak.
You say, "Can you hear me?"
The other person replies, "Yes, I can hear you now."
They aren't talking about attention.
They're talking about sound.
Now imagine a different phone call.
You're telling a long story.
Halfway through, you notice the other person isn't responding.
You might ask, "Are you listening?"
That question has a completely different meaning.
You're wondering if they're paying attention to what you're saying.
Here's something learners sometimes forget.
Go ahead.
The word listen is often followed by to.
That's a pattern you'll hear every day.
We say, "I'm listening to a podcast."
She's listening to her teacher.
They're listening to the weather report.
That little word to is easy to miss when you're speaking quickly.
Native speakers say it naturally because they've heard the pattern thousands of times.
Instead of memorizing the word listen by itself, try remembering the whole phrase, listen to.
That's often the easiest way to build natural English.
Let's try another comparison.
You're walking past a park.
You hear children laughing.
Then you sit on a bench and listen to a street musician playing the guitar.
Both situations involve sound.
One requires no effort.
The other requires your attention.
That's the difference we've been seeing again and again.
And the more examples you hear, the more natural that difference becomes.
There's another situation that catches many English learners by surprise.
Sometimes people use hear even when they aren't talking about everyday sounds.
I know what you mean. Someone might say, "I heard you're moving to another city."
That's a sentence you'll hear all the time.
What's interesting is that nobody is talking about a sound they heard directly.
That's right. In this case, heard means you received some information.
Maybe a friend mentioned it.
Maybe a coworker brought it up during lunch.
Or maybe another family member told you.
The important idea is that the information reached you.
Let's imagine a conversation. I walk into the office and say, "I heard you started learning Spanish."
I reply, "Yes, I started taking classes last month."
That sounds completely natural.
Nobody would normally say, "I listened you started learning Spanish."
Because listen doesn't work that way.
Here's another example.
A friend calls you in the evening.
They say, "I heard your team won the championship."
You answer, "They did. It was an exciting game."
Once again, heard means someone received the news.
Let's switch back to sounds for a moment.
Imagine you're walking through your neighborhood late in the evening.
Everything is quiet.
Then you hear a dog barking somewhere nearby.
You stop for a second.
You listen carefully because you're trying to figure out where the sound is coming from.
Notice how both words fit naturally into one situation.
First, you hear the barking.
Then you listen carefully.
That's something native speakers do without thinking about it.
Here's another situation. You're watching a movie at home.
Someone in another room asks you a question.
The television is a little too loud.
You answer, "Sorry, I didn't hear you."
That's a very common sentence.
You're simply saying the words didn't reach you clearly.
Now, imagine the television volume is low, but you're busy checking your email.
The other person asks the same question.
This time, you might say, "Sorry, I wasn't listening."
That's a different meaning.
The sound reached your ears, but your attention was somewhere else.
Those two sentences are easy to confuse at first.
But once you focus on attention, everything becomes much clearer.
Here's another example that happens in classrooms.
A teacher explains today's homework.
One student is looking out the window.
After class, the student asks a classmate, "What homework do we have?"
The classmate smiles and says, "You weren't listening."
The teacher's voice was loud enough to hear.
The student simply wasn't paying attention.
That's why listen is connected with concentration.
Let's think about music again.
A good idea. Imagine you're cleaning your apartment.
You usually listen to music while you work.
Half an hour later, someone asks which songs we're playing.
You laugh and say, "I have no idea. I heard the music, but I was thinking about something else."
That happens to me with podcasts sometimes.
Really?
I'll be driving somewhere, and after 15 minutes, I suddenly realize I don't remember what the speaker was talking about.
I've had the same experience. The podcast was playing, but my mind was busy planning the rest of the day.
That's a great reminder that listening isn't only about your ears.
It's also about your attention,
And attention can disappear for a moment without us noticing.
which is something every language learner experiences from time to time.
Sometimes you're listening carefully during an English lesson.
Then one unfamiliar word appears, and suddenly you're thinking about its meaning.
While you're thinking about that one word, the teacher has already spoken 3 more sentences.
That's why it's often better to keep listening instead of stopping every time you hear an unfamiliar word.
Little by little, your understanding becomes stronger because you're following the whole conversation instead of every individual word.
Something else that's interesting is that native speakers often connect listen with learning, while hear is simply part of everyday life.
That's true. Think about someone learning to play the piano.
Their teacher might say, "Listen to each note carefully."
The teacher isn't asking the student to notice that sound exists.
The teacher wants the student to pay close attention to every note.
Now, imagine you're walking past that music school.
You hear someone practicing inside.
You keep walking because you're on your way to work.
In that situation, you heard the music, but you didn't listen to it.
Let's move to another everyday example.
You're having dinner with your family.
Everyone is talking about their day.
Your younger sister starts telling a funny story about school.
Your phone lights up with a new message.
You look at your phone for a few seconds.
When you look up again, everyone is laughing.
You ask, "What happened?"
Someone smiles and says, "You weren't listening."
That's such a common moment in family conversations.
It happens with friends too,
Or during online meetings.
or even while watching television together.
Our attention moves very easily these days.
That's probably why people ask, "Are you listening?" more often than ever.
Here's another situation.
You're sitting in a coffee shop working on your laptop.
The place is full of conversations,
You hear people talking all around you.
but you're listening to your coworker on a video call.
There are dozens of sounds reaching your ears.
Yet you're choosing just one voice to focus on.
That's a great example of how these words work together.
Let's think about public transportation.
You're riding a train home after work.
An announcement comes over the speakers.
At first, you hear someone's voice.
Then you realize it's announcing your station.
Now you listen carefully because you don't want to miss your stop.
Native speakers use both words naturally in situations like that.
Here's another example from everyday life.
Imagine you're baking a cake for the first time.
Your grandmother is explaining each step.
She says, "Listen carefully because this part is important."
She wants you to pay attention so you don't miss an important detail. Later, someone asks how you learned the recipe.
You reply, "I listened to my grandmother."
That sounds much more natural than saying, "I heard my grandmother."
Because the focus is on learning from her instructions.
Now, let's look at another expression you'll hear often.
Someone says, "I hear what you're saying."
That's an interesting one.
It doesn't always mean they agree with you.
It often means, I understand your point.
Imagine two friends discussing where to go on vacation.
One friend wants the mountains.
The other prefers the beach.
One of them says, I hear what you're saying, but I still think the beach would be more relaxing.
That's a polite way to show you've understood another person's opinion.
It helps keep conversations friendly even when people have different ideas.
Here's another common expression.
Listen. Native speakers sometimes begin a sentence with that word.
For example, "Listen, I have an idea."
Or, listen, there's something I want to tell you.
In these examples, the speaker isn't talking about sound.
They're simply asking the other person to pay attention.
It's a very common way to introduce something important.
The more conversations you hear, the more you'll notice little patterns like these.
And once you notice them, they become much easier to use naturally in your own English.
Let's look at a few situations where choosing the right word changes the meaning of the sentence. These are the kinds of examples you'll hear in everyday English, and they're great practice.
I like these because they're realistic. They're not taken from a textbook. They're the kinds of conversations people have every day.
Imagine you're waiting at the airport.
You're reading a magazine while waiting for your flight.
Suddenly, an announcement comes over the loudspeaker.
At first, you hear someone's voice.
But because the airport is noisy, you can't understand the message.
So you stop reading and listen carefully to the next announcement.
That's a perfect example of both words working together.
First, the sound reaches your ears.
Then you focus your attention because the information matters.
Here's another situation.
You're in a restaurant with a group of friends.
Everyone is talking at the same time.
Across the room, you hear someone laughing loudly.
But you're listening to the friends sitting across from you because they're telling a story.
That's something our brains do naturally.
We hear many sounds, but we choose which one deserves our attention.
Now let's think about learning English.
That's where these words become especially useful.
Many learners say, I hear English every day.
That's a good start.
Maybe they hear English in movies, on social media, in songs, or while traveling.
But hearing English isn't always enough.
To improve, you also need to listen carefully.
That means paying attention to pronunciation, vocabulary, and sentence patterns.
Sometimes learners become frustrated because they say, I watch English videos every day, but I don't improve very quickly.
One possible reason is that they're hearing English without really listening to it.
There's a difference between having English in the background and actively focusing on it.
Even 10 minutes of careful listening can be more useful than an hour of background noise.
That's a habit many successful learners develop.
They don't just play English while doing something else all the time.
They spend part of their study time listening with a purpose.
Maybe they're trying to notice new vocabulary.
Maybe they're copying pronunciation.
Or maybe they're paying attention to how native speakers connect their ideas.
Here's another interesting situation.
You're talking with a friend in a quiet park.
A bicycle passes behind you,
You hear the bicycle go by.
but you continue listening to your friend because the conversation is important.
That's another reminder that our ears and our attention don't always work in the same way.
Let's think about children for a moment.
Parents often say something like, "Did you hear what I said?"
Sometimes the child answers, yes.
Then the parent asks, "If you heard me, why didn't you do it?"
Everyone laughs because the child probably heard the words.
But they weren't really listening.
That's why those two questions can have completely different meanings.
Can you hear me?
That's about sound.
Are you listening to me?
That's about attention.
Once you remember that difference, many English conversations become easier to understand.
Here's a useful learning tip.
Try noticing these words the next time you watch an English movie or TV show.
When someone says hear, ask yourself whether they're talking about a sound or some information they received.
And when someone says listen, notice what they're paying attention to.
That small exercise trains your brain to recognize natural English without memorizing grammar rules.
After a while, you'll begin predicting which word a native speaker is going to use before they even say it.
That's one of the signs that your listening skills are becoming stronger.
And that's when speaking becomes easier too, because the patterns start feeling familiar instead of something you have to translate.
Let's put everything we've learned into a few longer conversations. These are the kinds of exchanges you might hear at work, at home, or while spending time with friends. As you listen, pay attention to how naturally hear and listen fit into each situation.
Here's the first one. Imagine two co-workers are finishing a project together.
One coworker says, "Did you hear the announcement this morning?"
The other replies, "No, I was talking to a client. What happened?"
The first coworker says, "The company is opening a new office next year."
A few minutes later, the manager starts explaining the new plans during a meeting.
Everyone becomes quiet and listens carefully.
That's a nice example because the conversation begins with receiving news and then changes to paying attention.
Let's imagine another situation.
You're visiting your grandparents for the weekend.
Your grandfather starts telling stories about his childhood.
Everyone around the table is listening closely.
Halfway through the story, a clock on the wall begins making a loud sound.
Everyone hears the clock.
But after a second, they return to listening to the story.
That's how attention naturally moves from one sound to another.
Here's another everyday conversation.
Two friends are walking through a city park.
One friend suddenly stops.
They say, "Do you hear that?"
The other friend listens for a few seconds.
Then they smile and say, "It's someone playing the violin."
The first person noticed the sound.
The second person focused on identifying it.
Now let's think about school.
A teacher is explaining a science experiment.
Most students are listening carefully.
One student is looking out the window instead.
After class, that student asks, "What are we supposed to do tomorrow?"
Another student laughs and says, "You should have listened."
That's a sentence teachers probably hear every week.
Probably every day.
Here's another situation.
You're driving with a friend.
The GPS gives directions,
You hear the voice say something.
but you're busy talking.
A few minutes later, your friend asks, "Didn't you listen to the GPS?"
You smile and realize you've missed the turn.
That's a situation many drivers can relate to.
Let's move to something a little different.
Imagine you're learning to cook.
You're watching an online cooking class.
The chef explains how long the bread should stay in the oven.
If you're listening carefully, you'll probably remember the instructions.
If you're checking messages on your phone the whole time, you might hear the chef speaking but miss the important details.
That's another reminder that attention makes all the difference.
Here's a conversation between two friends after a concert.
One friend asks, "Did you hear the new band tonight?"
The other says, "Yes, and I listened to every song. They were amazing."
Both words appear naturally because they describe different experiences.
First, they experienced the sounds.
Then they focused on enjoying the music.
I think one reason native speakers use these words so naturally is that they don't stop to think about grammar.
They simply think about what's happening. Am I noticing a sound?
Or am I paying attention?
Once you answer that question, choosing the right word becomes much easier.
That's a good habit to practice while watching English videos or talking with native speakers.
Instead of translating into your first language, try thinking about the situation itself.
The meaning becomes much clearer that way.
And after enough practice, you'll begin using hear and listen naturally without stopping to think about them.
We've reached the final part of today's conversation, so let's bring everything together with a quick review. If you can remember one simple idea after this episode, you'll be able to choose hear and listen much more confidently.
That's a great goal because these words appear in English every single day. Once they become natural, you'll notice them in conversations, movies, podcasts, and even while traveling.
Let's start with one final comparison.
Imagine you're sitting in your backyard on a quiet evening. Suddenly, you hear thunder in the distance.
A few minutes later, you stop what you're doing and listen to the rain hitting the roof.
The thunder reached your ears without any effort.
The rain became something you chose to focus on.
That's the difference we've been talking about throughout today's episode.
One happens naturally.
The other requires attention.
Here's another everyday situation.
You're in a bookstore looking for a new novel.
Someone nearby says your name.
You hear your name immediately.
You turn around and listen because your friend wants to tell you something.
That's how quickly we move between hearing and listening in real life.
Most of the time, we don't even notice we're doing it. Let's imagine one more conversation.
Most of the time, we don't even notice we're doing it.
Let's imagine one more conversation.
Two friends are walking home after work.
One of them says, "I heard there's a new cafe opening near the station."
The other replies, "Really? I haven't heard anything about that."
A few days later, they visit the cafe together.
Soft jazz is playing in the background.
One friend says, "I love listening to music while I drink coffee."
That's a conversation you could easily hear between native speakers.
Notice something interesting.
The first part uses heard because they're talking about receiving information.
The second part uses listening because they're choosing to enjoy the music.
Both meanings are completely natural.
Let's do one last practice together.
I'll describe a situation and you can decide which word fits.
You're walking through a forest.
A bird sings somewhere above you.
You probably hear the bird.
Then you stop walking because you want to enjoy the sound.
Now you're listening to the bird.
Here's another one.
Your teacher explains today's lesson.
If you're paying attention, you're listening to your teacher.
Later, your friend asks what the homework is.
If you weren't paying attention, you might say, "Sorry, I didn't hear what the teacher said."
Native speakers use sentences like these every day.
And the more you hear them, the easier they become to remember.
Before we finish, here's one simple memory trick.
Ask yourself one question.
Am I simply noticing a sound or am I paying attention to it?
If the sound reaches you naturally, choose hear.
If you're focusing on the sound or the speaker, choose listen.
That's the easiest way to think about it.
You don't need long grammar rules.
You just need to think about attention.
Every conversation you have in English is another chance to practice these two words naturally.
Don't worry if you make a mistake once in a while.
Even small improvements add up over time. Keep listening to real English, keep noticing these patterns, and keep using them whenever you have the chance.
Thank you for spending your time with us today. We hope this conversation helped make the difference between hear and listen much clearer.
If you found today's episode useful, please like this episode, subscribe to the channel, and share it with another English learner. Your support helps us create more practical conversations like this every week.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next conversation.